We need to talk about the April LSAT because what happened to remote test takers this week was one of the worst testing disasters I've seen in over 20 years of working in LSAT prep. And if you're planning on taking the LSAT anytime in the next few months, you've got to hear this. This was not a handful of people with bad internet. This was Prometric's entire remote proctoring system buckling, locking test takers out of their exams mid-test, leaving them stranded on hold for hours, and in some cases, blowing up their admissions timelines completely. Let me walk you through it from the beginning. The trouble started before the exam even launched. Test takers logged in, went through security, showed their IDs, scanned the room, did the whole protocol, and then just sat there, and nothing happened. No proctor showed up. One person waited 90 minutes before anyone appeared to let them start their test. Another person cleared the full security check, sat staring at a dead screen for almost an hour, and when the proctor finally showed up, they were told to do the entire check-in over again from scratch. So imagine that before you've touched a single LSAT question, you've spent 90 minutes hemorrhaging focus and adrenaline in your bedroom waiting for permission to take a test you paid $250 for. But the check-in delays, as bad as they were not the main event. The real carnage happened at intermission. For anybody who doesn't know how this works, the LSAT has a 10-minute break between sections 2 and 3. When you're testing remotely, you message your proctor when your break is over, they run a quick security recheck, and then they resume your exam. It's a simple process done thousands of times across thousands of test takers. But here's what happened on this administration. Proctors paused the exam for the post-break security check, and the system refused to let them unpause it. The exam just locked. And from that point forward, for person after person after person, nothing anyone tried made any difference. The standard fix was to close ProProctor and reopen it, which meant going through the full security check again from scratch. And when the exam still wouldn't load, doing it again and again. One person went through 7 complete security check-ins in a single testing session. Another clocked 6 of them, totaling over an hour and 40 minutes just on the check-in process. And after all that, the exam still wouldn't come back. Some people got dumped all the way back to the start screen. One test taker saw an option to start April 2026 LSAT as if the 2 sections they'd already completed had been erased from existence. Now, the range of how this hit people was huge. One person was 20 minutes from finishing the entire exam in their 4th section, tracking for a 175 plus score, and they got ripped out of their test with no way back in. Another person started at 9:30 in the morning and didn't finish until 10 p.m. That's 12 and a half hours for a 3.5-hour exam. Someone else spent 3 hours with Prometric IT, only to be told the test was being thrown out completely. And because of the calendar, they're now going to miss application deadlines and lose a full admission cycle because software crashed at intermission. And multiple peoples were in tears during the process. One person said there's got to be a webcam recording of them somewhere in Prometric servers, of them breaking down after being told to reboot the application for the 4th time. Another test taker, someone who gets accommodations for test anxiety, was mid-panic attack while this was happening. After 3 hours of technical failures that were entirely on Prometric's end, they expressed frustration in the chat, and the proctor put them on hold for 30 minutes and then terminated their exam because the test taker called the situation bullshit, which it was. That's 3 hours of Prometric failures, and the test taker is the one who gets punished. This is, of course, indefensible. Now let's talk about the support, or whatever you want to call it, because it's not support. The ProProctor chat was either unresponsive or actively unhelpful. Test takers would send messages and hear nothing for 20-30 minutes at a stretch. One proctor told a test taker to, quote, wait a while after the exam froze. After 15 minutes of silence later, that proctor popped back in and asked, are you taking the exam? No, of course they were not, because it was still frozen, because the proctor told them to wait and then apparently forgot they existed. And of course, the phone lines were also jammed. Half-hour holds, hour-long holds, and when someone finally got through, the response was almost always, file a complaint. No troubleshooting, no escalation, no urgency, just file a complaint as if you weren't going to do that already. And then the proctors were also contradicting each other. One would give a set of instructions, the next would say the opposite. There was clearly no handbook or playbook for what was happening, which tells me either Prometric never planned for a failure at this scale, or they did, but they didn't train anybody on how to handle it. And of course, neither answer is acceptable. Now, here's the thing. I've been watching LSAT administrations closely for over 2 decades, and the last several test dates had actually been running pretty smoothly compared to when they first moved the exam online anyway. And the volume of reported failures this single day, the first day of the April 2026 LSAT, that was worse than anything I've seen across all test days of the last 2 administrations combined. Both of them combined. This one single day in April was worse. It was a total systemic breakdown. And if you're trying to figure out root causes, why did this happen? Was it the number of people taking it? I don't think so, because the January LSAT had a bigger first day and it ran fine. It seems like something broke inside Prometric's infrastructure, and as of right now, there has been no public explanation of what it was or why it happened. Now, if you were one of the people affected, first off, I'm sorry to hear of what you went through. Here's what I'm going to tell you to do. Step 1, file a test day complaint with LSAC. Do it today. There is a deadline and you don't want to miss it. You log into LawHub, click the LSAT, then LSAT status, then view all LSAT information, then submit test day complaint or feedback. Select technical as your complaint category. Now, the form only gives you 500 characters, not a whole lot of space, not nearly enough to describe what you went through. So try to be concise, just hit the essential facts, what happened, when it happened, how it affected your ability to complete the exam. Then send a separate email to LSAC with the full detailed version, complete timeline, show every proctor interaction, everything you can possibly remember. You want the whole story on record, not some 500-character truncated version. You can email LSAC at lsacinfo@lsac.org. Now, quick heads up, some people have reported the LSAC complaint form itself glitching out and throwing error messages, ironically. If that happens, keep trying, but regardless, send your email directly from your own email account. Again, the email is lsacinfo@lsac.org. You've got to have a paper trail no matter what. Now, after they review your complaint, they're going to give you 2 options. One option, retake the LSAT on April 21st. It'll be a completely different test form, different questions. It'll be all 4 scored sections. You can choose either in-person or remote, and your original test from this administration gets tossed. Nothing on your record, no law school will ever know that you took it. Option number 2, cancel the April LSAT entirely and apply your registration fee toward a future test like the June LSAT. Again, same clean record from April, no indication to schools that you took it in April. Now, if your exam was meaningfully disrupted, if you couldn't finish, if you lost serious time, if you were mentally shot by the time you got back in, which is understandable, of course, go for the April 21st retake. Take it in person. Do not go remote again, obviously, if you feel like you can take it on the 21st while you're still fresh on it in the next 2 weeks. Now, there is a group of you in a tricky spot where you got hammered by the tech problems, you sat through the freezes and the reboots and the check-ins, but you pushed through and you ended up finishing all 4 sections successfully. And now you're wondering, do I keep whatever may have come out of that, or do I just throw it away and retake? Unfortunately, LSAC will not let you see your score and then decide. You got to choose blindly. So you want to be honest with yourself about 3 things. First, how much time did you lose? How rattled were you when you got back into the exam? And do you believe sections 3 and 4 adequately reflected what you're genuinely capable of? And if you know the answer to that is no, if you were running on fumes by the time you finished, go for the retake. You'll have 2 more weeks and a better testing environment. It's a much better trade than having a compromised score sitting on your record that doesn't reflect your true potential following you through every application. So if the disruption was minimal, if you found your rhythm again, you walked away feeling okay, waiting for your score to come back is a reasonable move. But you should file the complaint either way. You want it documented no matter what, just in case. Now, I want to zoom out for a second because this matters for everybody, not just those who took it in April, those who are taking it coming up the next couple of days or taking it in June or August or beyond. LSAC has already announced that remote testing is being discontinued. The June LSAT is going to be the last one where they offer it remotely. In my view, they should have discontinued remote quite a while ago between the cheating and the tech issues, but we are where we are. Starting in August, every single test taker sits for the exam in person at a testing center with rare and few exceptions. So for those takes, no more ProProctor app, no more Prometric chat support. remote testing for the LSAT will be over for almost everybody. Now, Prometric's system has been unreliable for years for those taking it remotely. Many people have been kicked out of the remote LSAT in different administrations, different locations, with different internet connections, and it was never your equipment. It was Prometric themselves. And so in terms of next steps, if you're registered for the June LSAT and you're even considering testing remotely, I would recommend you change your plans, go for in-person. I know it might be inconvenient to have to commute there, and taking it at home might feel more comfortable, but at a testing center, at least, it's a controlled environment, controlled tech, and there are human beings in the room who are accountable and can help you deal with it right away. You're not alone in your bedroom hoping a chat window responds before the day's over. And if you're taking it in August or beyond, remote's not even an option anyway, with rare exceptions, so start planning your in-person logistics now. Look up what is the nearest testing center. Are you going to drive there? Are you going to stay in a hotel the night before? Figure out parking. Now, I know some folks in the chat and, of course, online have been talking about a class action lawsuit against Prometric, and I understand that impulse because it is infuriating, honestly. There are people who lost entire admission cycles over this. These are real people, real lives, but practically speaking, the most productive thing you can do right now is file your complaint, secure your retake or your fee transfer to June, and put your energy into the next test. What is in your control is how you respond from here. But that being said, document everything like the future lawyer you are, take screenshots, save the chat logs from ProProctor if you have them, document a detailed written timeline of what happened, when, and what each proctor told you, because that makes your LSAC complaint stronger. If you have to dispute anything down the road, you're going to be glad you have this and that you emailed it to LSAC right away. And if this happened to you, know that you did nothing wrong. You were ready. Prometric was not ready. So file that complaint, lock in April 21st, go in person, and then go do what you've been training to do all along. And if you'd like my help preparing for your LSAT retake, whether it's the 21st or June or August or beyond, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. That's an open offer for everybody. Happy to help you out. I see some questions here in the chat. I see Law Schools of Privilege is saying, I paid $300 for taking it in a hotel, and they lied about the Wi-Fi. That is unfortunate. Sorry to hear it. Yeah, so if you're taking it in an unfamiliar environment, I would recommend bringing an Ethernet cable so that you can plug in your internet. Aside from Wi-Fi sometimes being shaky or non-existent, hotel Wi-Fi can be unreliable sometimes. If you can plug it in, you're more likely to have a smooth experience. No guarantees that it'll be perfect, of course, but you do what you can. So get that Ethernet cable, order it on Amazon if you can. They're pretty cheap, maybe 10, 15 bucks. Plug it in and you'll be glad you had it. Coco says, I got stuck 2 hours in intermission between sections. Insanely disappointing. Yeah, I mean, the remote testing has been terrible pretty much throughout ever since they introduced it. We're going on now about 6 years of remote testing since the beginning of the pandemic. First, it was with a different company. They switched it. It was ProctorU. Now it's Prometric. Neither one's great, of course. It's like the devil you know versus the devil you don't. I think LSAC went to Prometric because they wanted the option to offer in person as well. ProctorU only had remote. Prometric has both. But with the cheating happening over the past couple of years, the pivot to in-person makes sense. And so I think that if you could take it in person, then from LSAC's perspective, you avoid the cheating and the remote tech issues. And for you as a test taker, of course, at least you're going to hopefully have a smoother experience. Just scanning through for other questions here. See a question asking, if I scores a 170, do I keep it? Yeah, if you scored a 170, that's probably an LSAT score worth keeping. That's top 4%. And of course, you might be shooting for a higher LSAT score, depending on your law school goals. But I think a 170 is perfectly respectable. And if you did the score preview and you want to keep your score, 170 is nothing to be ashamed of. It's a great score. You might want 175, but no one's going to look down on you for having a 170 regardless. I see Tommy says, I got a 156 in October and a 153 in January, but I had the flu that week. Should I write an addendum? So first off, sorry to hear about the score drop. Having the flu is certainly a legit reason for a score to drop, but an addendum isn't really necessary. And to be frank, law schools aren't going to care. It's useful context, of course, but the score is the score at the end of the day. And the answer is, if you want to show your true potential on the LSAT, show what you're fully capable of, the best path forward is to retake. You could retake it in June, you could retake it in August and apply at the beginning of the cycle in the fall. But if you want to tell them and show them, hey, I'm capable of more than that first 156, the way you do that is by actually taking it and scoring higher. And as a heads up for anyone in the future, I mean, if you're suffering from the flu, I probably wouldn't go ahead and take the LSAT at all. Hindsight being 2020, of course, but you're unlikely to do your best when you're sick with the flu, right? So I would just withdraw from the LSAT. Law schools won't even ever know that you were signed up for it, and you can take it again in a month or two. The LSAT's offered 8 times a year, and so there's always another one just around the corner. Law School's a Privilege says a 170 is not good for Columbia Law School. Fair point. I mean, listen, the top 14 law schools all have LSAT medians of 170 to 174, higher end being 174, lower being 170. And so, yes, a 170 is technically below Columbia Law School's medians. That being said, a 170 is not a bad score. Now, if you want Columbia, yes, I would retake beyond a 170, but I think to be secure in what you have in the bag, I would still keep the 170. I wouldn't cancel the 170. And the reason being, it's a good enough score to get you a lot of pretty solid law school outcomes, and there is no guarantee that you will be able to retake the LSAT and score higher. Now, I would try to retake the LSAT and score higher if you want a top 6 law school, yes, of course. But worst case scenario, you have an LSAT test day like folks had yesterday with the April LSAT. Imagine that was your last chance to take it, and you weren't able to take it successfully. You had a 12-hour day for what should have been a 2.5-hour exam, right? So my point being here that 170 is good enough that it could get you a great outcome. You may not be able to retake and score higher. You should try to retake and score higher. And if you want to maximize your T14 or T6 admissions, yes, go for the 175. But just for security reasons, I would keep the 170. Mrs. Robinson asks, are they taking the most recent score or the highest score? So good news is that law schools take into consideration the highest LSAT score on your record. They do not average multiple LSAT scores. And so that means there is no downside to retaking the LSAT. If you do better on a retake, great, the higher score counts. If you do worse, no big deal. The highest score on your report overall is what they will ultimately care about. So for that reason, if April didn't go well, you want to retake on the 21st or in June or in August, you can, and the highest score of those takes is ultimately what will matter the most. So for those applying in the fall, you've got plenty of time ahead of you. If you're at the tail end of this cycle, it's unfortunate. Try to stay fresh on the LSAT for another 2 weeks and take it on the 21st. I see Susan's asking, if you have ADHD and get more time, do the law schools know this and do they care? Okay, so law schools will not know if you got accommodations for extra time. It's not documented on your record. Your school is viewed the same as everybody else's. And that's because of the Americans with Disabilities Act. They don't want law schools discriminating against you for your accommodations, and so they won't know whether you got extra time or extra breaks or anything like that. It's a big question mark for them. The scores are all viewed the same. Whether you got time and a half or double time or extra breaks, it's all viewed the same as someone with standard accommodations, standard timing. Jared says, I never even saw my proctor, and they never messaged me at all in the break. The program ran, and after the 10 minutes, I was able to continue, but I never knew if the proctor approved anything. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It feels kind of like you're on one of those support chats with like your internet cable service provider, right? Like you would expect better given what you're paying and given the stakes, right? And it's unfortunate that Prometric has such bad customer service and tech support. I think the best way to win this game is not to play it at all, to quote that old War Games movie for anyone who knows what I'm talking about. But basically, idea being that you should just take it in person. If you take it in person, there is a human being in the room with you who you can talk to. And if there's a problem with your computer, they could just switch you over to a different computer. But regardless, you are removing the number one point of failure, which is the support chat with the remote proctor, who themselves may have a shaky internet connection, and they're clearly running on a rather unstable communication system to begin with. If you're taking it in person, you're on Prometric servers directly, and you have the proctor there, so there's no remote proctoring. That's the best thing I would consider and deal with. And of course, if you live super far from a testing center, it may not be viable, but hopefully most of you are within reasonable commuting distance to a testing center. Earl is asking, what is the most money I can earn with law school? I love the question. It's like totally unfiltered and raw. It's like, how can I make money with this? um, Big law. I mean, going into big law is the path a lot of folks pursue if they just want to make a lot of money. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. If you want to support your family, have a stable income, of course, it's a valid path forward for your career. And you also want to get a good return on the investment that you're spending on your law school tuition and the 3 years of time. So I'm a bit in jest about that. But big law would be the answer. I mean, there are starting salaries of 225, $250,000 or more for first year associates. Those are, of course, the top tippy top white shoe law firms in major markets like New York and DC. For example, I think Columbia Law is generally considered one of the best law schools for big law placement, so I would look into that. Mrs. Robinson asks, is it better to have a recommendation letter from an undergrad professor or my commissioner? My first thought is, why not both? I mean, you want to have minimum 2 rec letters regardless. 3 is a pretty good number, and 4, if you can get 4 solid letters, then go for 4. So I'd say 2 at the minimum, 3 as a base, as an average, and then 4 for the max. If you can get a solid letter from a professor, if you have a good relationship with them and they have a pretty fresh memory of you, then get one from the professor. You also typically want one from an employer or internship supervisor if you can. When you say your commissioner, I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but if this person has supervised you in a direct capacity and knows you well, can speak to your work ethic and your character, then by all means get that letter too. Ryan Shipwreck asks, 2.8 GPA, 169 LSAT, how cooked am I? And so I feel like the Shipwreck username is appropriate, right? Username checks out. So 2.8 GPA is frankly pretty low, just because grade inflation is ridiculous. I was talking about that yesterday, I think. 169 LSAT is not a bad LSAT score. It's pretty good, but of course the question is, where do you want to go? Numbers are only good or bad relative to the outcomes that you're shooting for. So for an unranked law school, when that's like below 100, below 150, it's a pretty good LSAT score. It's an amazing LSAT score. For a top 14 law school, those numbers are pretty low. And so the question is, what do you want to do? What kind of goals are you shooting for? And then we can talk about how strong or weak your numbers are relative to your goals. So I see you're listing a bunch of schools here: USD, USC, LMU, PEP, SMU. I don't know all their numbers off the top of my head. I mean, the most direct thing I'll say is you can access the numbers that you need directly yourself pretty easily. If you go on law school data or you go on the American Bar Association's 509 reports, you can directly see what kind of numbers you need to be competitive at any given law school. There's roughly 200 ABA-approved law schools. I don't know all of their numbers off the top of my head, but you can look up the medians for the law schools that you're targeting, and you can see, generally speaking, what kind of LSAT score or GPA you would need to be competitive. I'll tell you straight up that your 2.8 GPA is pretty low. It's significantly below the medians, but if you can get a higher LSAT score, you might still have a shot at some of the schools you're talking about. But I'd probably want you to retake and get 170, 173 plus for better outcomes. Han asks, I take the April LSAT tomorrow. Any tips for what I should be doing today? First off, I would relax. I would take it easy. I wouldn't do any serious studying. I wouldn't take a full practice test. I want you going in feeling fresh. So this is the time to kind of just relax, take a hot bath, go for a walk, get a massage, get all your ducks in a row in terms of your number 2 pencils and your scratch paper and your government issued ID and your snacks and your water bottle, granola bars. Have all that put together, ready to go. And of course, if you're taking the LSAT in person, you want to have a sense of what your process will be for getting to the test center. Is your car full of gas? Is your ride going to pick you up? Is your phone charged to order an Uber, whatever it's going to be? Get that all down, right? If you're taking it remotely, is your internet connection solid? Do you have an Ethernet cable to plug in to make it even more reliable? Are your roommates or family going to stay off the Netflix so that they're not affecting your internet connection? Are you aware of what happened to people yesterday that I just talked about so that you can go in prepared and have your whole day blocked off for this and have your expectations sufficiently low so that you're pleasantly surprised if things go well, which of course I hope they do. Also, for peace of mind, might not be a bad idea to sign up for the June LSAT as a backup just in case you need it, worst case scenario. Hopefully, of course, you won't need to take it in June, but that can sometimes reduce the stress associated with the LSAT, knowing that while the LSAT as a whole is, of course, important, no one particular LSAT test date will make or break you because you can retake. You can take it in June or August or beyond and still apply the second the applications open this fall. I see Michael's asking, how does your performance, grades, and class rank in law school affect your job search after graduation? That's a good question. Any current law students want to share their thoughts on that? I mean, my understanding is that all of that can affect your job search, right? Especially if you want a clerkship, if you want to go into academia, if you want to go into big law, they are going to ask how you did relative to others in your class. So sometimes it's better to be a big fish in a small pond. Go to a law school where you're going to rank relatively well, just based on your stats going in, right? If you're going to Harvard Law, hard to be at the top of the class. If you're going to a law school ranked 60, maybe you're going to do better. And so if you're competing for jobs in that region, in that market, and law firms are recruiting on campus, might be worth considering going to a lower ranked school where you can rank better. Thomas says, I was accepted to both UChicago or Harvard. Which should I pick? It's a good question. I mean, did either of them offer you any scholarship money? That's my first thought. I know Harvard doesn't offer merit aid, but were you able to get need-based aid? Sometimes scholarship money can help make the difference. The question is also, what do you want to do with the degree, right? If you want to become the next president, if you want to become a Supreme Court justice, maybe you want to choose Harvard. If you want to go into academia, maybe you want to choose Chicago. I don't know. What do you think? Ranking alone doesn't dictate everything, but of course the Harvard brand has a lot to be said for it. Officer Nubbs asks, how many LSAT retakes before you start to look bad? You know, I think folks worry about this a bit too much. I'm not saying take the LSAT 7 times in a row and then just kind of throwing a lot against the wall and seeing what sticks. But if you look at it from the law school's perspective, they only have incentive to care about the highest LSAT score on your record because that's what they report to the American Bar Association, which in turn is pulled by US News for inclusion in the rankings. And so while you might be stressed about multiple takes and you might be embarrassed by multiple takes, the highest score is ultimately what counts. So that's what law schools count. Now, if you're taking it 5 times in a row and your score is not really changing, law schools will ask themselves, is this person exercising good judgment and going in properly prepared and learning from their previous takes, or are they just taking it to take it? You want to properly study for each retake and learn from the past to prepare better for the future. But ultimately, I think it's worth retaking if you're in doubt. If you feel like you could do better and you're willing to study differently and better for the next time around, it's probably worth retaking. And you can take it, by the way, 5 times in 5 years, 7 times for life. If you get a 180, you can't take it again. Lana asks, do you know if the University of Kentucky Law is a good school? No, I don't know whether it's a good school, but I can tell you how to find out. I mean, again, when you're evaluating a law school on the question of whether you can get in, look at their LSAT medians and their GPA medians. That will help you determine whether they might accept you. Then as for the question, should you accept an offer of admission from them, you want to know what are their bar passage rates and what are their typical employment outcomes. Meaning, what percentage of the graduates are employed in a job that requires a JD within 9 months of graduation, and what percentage of the graduates pass the bar exam on the first try. You can also look at what percentage of the graduates end up in big law jobs if you want to work in big law. So those are the things I would look at with regard to any law school that you're considering, and you can see this in the American Bar Association 509 reports. The website Law School Transparency is also really good for breaking down this sort of data in a more accessible way with nice charts and graphs to make it more digestible, but you could also see this directly in the ABA website. I'm just scanning through for more questions here. Keep them coming, folks. Thanks for asking. Gabe is asking, what is a good non-standard, unpopular law school to get into on the East Coast? I gotta admit, Gabe, I'm curious about why you're asking that. That's not the sort of question I tend to get very often. What are some unpopular non-standard law schools? I'll say this. There are some law schools that are unaccredited, meaning they are not accredited by the American Bar Association. And so that would make them relatively unpopular, but they're unaccredited for a reason. They're unaccredited because they typically don't have good employment outcomes. They don't have good bar passage rates. And so the return on your investment from going to one of those law schools is typically not very good. I'm not going to name any names here because I don't want to promote them. I think that most students should avoid those law schools at all costs. If you want to know which law schools are less popular, a very simple metric for that would be look for the law schools that have the worst outcomes. Typically, if they have worse outcomes, fewer people want to go there. And so what are the law schools with the worst bar passage rates? How many students fail the bar exam? How many students don't get JD required employment within 9 months of graduation? Those are the law schools you want to steer clear of. Now, maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, I want the most unpopular law schools because they'll give me the most scholarship money. And in that case, it's a fair point, right? In that situation, you would say, okay, well, I want to go to a law school that nobody else wants to go to because if they're so unpopular, they're going to be willing to give me more scholarship money to attract me to attend. Then you could say, okay, well, you want to go there for free, fine. But also consider you're spending 3 years of your life and the opportunity cost of not working during that time. And I mean, how many times are you going to go to law school? Most people only go to law school once in their lives for 3 years, and that's it. And so we have on the one hand, Thomas, who commented he's choosing between UChicago and Harvard, versus Gabe, who's saying, what's the worst law school out there? So consider, do your due diligence, consider all of this. But I think you probably don't want to go to the worst school. I would say maybe you want to go to a relatively lower ranked law school with more scholarship money, but maybe not literally the worst. Charlie says, I'd rather take $300,000 and buy crypto. Okay, maybe a risky proposition there. Many people have made a lot of money. Many people have lost a lot of money on that. Chris Kane says, got a 171 LSAT and went to a 4th tier law school with a full ride. Okay, so that's an outcome worth considering, right? 0 tuition debt, got a full ride because he had a good LSAT score. Awesome outcome. Law Schools of Privilege asks, what's the best law school in New York for a full ride? Okay, so New York, which is actually where I'm from, so I'm pretty familiar. I mean, you've got Columbia and NYU in the T6 category. Those law schools are unlikely to give you a full ride, but you have many law schools that are lower ranked and some in the middle as well. I mean, you can look at, for example, CUNY Law, which is a public institution, by the way, so their baseline tuition is already a lot cheaper. You've got St. John's, you've got Hofstra, you've got Seton Hall in New Jersey, you have Brooklyn Law, you have Cardozo. Those law schools are all relatively lower ranked, some more than others, but you're going to get more scholarship money at those schools. Then you have Fordham, which is still, I think, T30, but not in the T6 category. So you have a lot of options to get a full ride at the first schools I mentioned that are lower ranked. The question is how to get there. It's your LSAT score and your GPA. So the question becomes, how strong is your LSAT score? How strong is your GPA? If your GPA is lower, you want to have a relatively higher LSAT score to compensate. I see Jairam's asking about extracurriculars and internships. How important are they? The answer is not very, because they're soft factors. By definition, they are not quantifiable. And so for that reason, law schools don't give them as much attention or consideration when evaluating you. I'd rather you have no or few extracurriculars and have a higher LSAT score in terms of maximizing your outcomes. Again, because of how the US News rankings work, which, by the way, just came out this week for those who aren't aware. I did a couple of videos on that earlier this week. It's really your LSAT score and GPA that are the main considerations because they're quantifiable. That's what US News considers. And actually, 92% of the US News rankings are either directly or indirectly related to your LSAT score and your GPA. So for example, bar passage rates are LSAT correlated. 1L grades are LSAT correlated. Employment is also LSAT correlated. So it's a direct connection there. I see a question's asking, what law school you suggest me to go to? And the answer is, I mean, I can't tell you where to go because the question is not just which law school should you go to, but which law school should you go to at what price? There are some law schools that are not worth going to if you pay a sticker, but they are worth going to if you can go for free. So consider not only did you get in, but did you get in with what amount of scholarship money? Some law schools are worth it at one price, but not another. It's like, should I buy a Lamborghini? And for some folks, it's like if you're paying full price for the Lamborghini, like the Blue Book, your Kelley Blue Book value, maybe not worth it. If you could buy it for $100, then yeah, that's a great deal. You should grab it right away. Not saying the deal is ever going to necessarily be that good. Like you're not going to go to Harvard Law for free based on merit, but you could go to many great law schools for a discount on their tuition if you can get a sufficiently high scholarship through your LSAT score and your GPA. I see Sheepy's asking, what schools give the best scholarships? That's a fantastic question. Aside from Harvard and Yale law schools, every single other law school, my understanding at least, is that you can get merit scholarships based on the strength of your application relative to their medians. And so if your LSAT score and your GPA are above their medians, they're going to give you more scholarship money. So pretty much every single law school will give you a great scholarship if you can apply to them with sufficiently strong numbers. Because if they can get you to choose their law school, you will help them raise their medians, you will help them raise their standing in the rankings for the future, and that helps them to attract applicants in the future, to help determine their prestige, helps them attract donations from alumni as well. I see Macron's asking, how easy is it to go from a 164 to a 175? Well, by definition, only 1% of people score a 175 or higher. So apparently it's not that easy to get a 175 if only 1% of people do it. And of course, that's definitional because the LSAT is, for lack of a better phrase, it's roughly graded on a curve, right? So it's people, the LSAT is designed definitionally to spread people along a spectrum from 120 to 180. So only 1% are going to score a 175. The question is, how are you going to design your study plan so that you can get nearly every single LSAT question right, so you can get a 175? So the gap between a 164 and a 175 is pretty significant. Many more people score in the 160s than score 175 plus. So you've got to study differently than the majority in order to achieve a top score. And what we do is we help students design more efficient study plans to get top scores. And if you want to talk through what your study plan could look like, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally. Happy to talk you through what that could be. The link to book that free tutoring with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube. The link is in the chat on YouTube. The link is in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. That's an open offer for everybody watching this now or later, by the way. What we do during these calls is we look at where you're currently at, what your goal score is when you're taking the LSAT, and then we help you design a study plan to get you from here to there over that time frame. If you're taking the LSAT in June, approximately 2 months from now, it's going to be a more intensive boot camp style approach. If it's taking it in August or September or beyond, we could take a more slow and steady approach. There's roughly 15 different types of logical reasoning questions on the LSAT. You've got strengthen, weaken, flaw, parallel, resolve, and so on. There's also reading comp to work on as well. We also look at pacing and time management, doing individual sections, and then full-length exams to build up your endurance. And so there is a lot to cover, but assuming that you're not taking the LSAT today or tomorrow, you've got at least 2 months till the June LSAT and 4 months till August, so there is plenty of time to get your score up over that time frame. And so, of course, we like to personalize every program to the individual student because everyone's got different needs. Some students have only 1 or 2 hours a day that they could put in. Others can study for the LSAT full-time with no other obligations. Some students have young children. Some students are working full-time. Everyone's got a different situation. So I can't make it a one-size-fits-all sort of program. I always like to meet with you personally to make sure it's going to be a good fit and make sure that you're getting a sufficient degree of support for your study program because, of course, it's our reputation on the line as well. We want to get you the results. And so the only way to join our personal coaching programs is to book that free call with me. The link, again, is unpluggedprep.com/start. Happy to meet with anyone now or later to talk you through your study plan. I see Dante's asking, I scored a 160 on the LSAT last admission cycle. The top score on my practice test was 166. How can I improve from here? Okay, so you did not score at the top end. You scored a 160, but you know that you're capable of 166 or higher, at least theoretically. The question is, what are your weak areas? When you're in the 160s, there might be one or two particular areas of weakness that you want to drill on the side, maybe certain trends in particular logical reasoning question types, maybe certain methods of reasoning. Maybe it's reading comp for all I know. I'd have to look at your practice tests and diagnose your weak areas, but know this. I mean, in logical reasoning, I mentioned all these different question types, but the three most common types of logical reasoning questions are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. Those are the more common question types, and so you're going to get more of a return on your investment from spending time there than on the relatively less common types like parallel reasoning, aka match the structure, for example. And so while everybody hates parallel reasoning because it's so wordy, it's not worth quite as much of your time as necessary assumption would be, given necessary assumption being far more common. And so sometimes the fastest path for you to increase your score is to increase your accuracy on a relatively more common type of question. And I know a lot of folks love drilling LSAT questions by type, but hey, reading comp is also a whole third of the test. And so you don't want to sleep on that either. I'm actually, for those who aren't aware, I'm actually recording free explanations for every single LSAT reading comprehension passage ever. I've been doing additional daily lives covering those. They're on my YouTube channel through the link in my bio. There's approximately 400 released reading comp passages, and I'm nearly a quarter of the way through. And so if you want to access those, they're through the link in my bio on TikTok and IG. If you want to see them, I've got a playlist going where I'm adding more every weekday. But bottom line, again, back to the efficiency piece of this, sometimes the question type you hate is not the question type you've got to focus on. You want to work on the relatively more common types because you're going to get more return on your time invested there. And so we help our students craft personal study plans to level up the efficiency of their prep, because chances are the LSAT's not the only thing you're doing in your life over the span of 2 to 4 months. And so we want to make sure that you're using your limited time as effectively as possible. And so if you want to book that free tutoring with me, again, the link's in my bio, links below the video. Happy to help you out. I see Macron's asking, would you say that next cycle LSAT scores will be lower given all the new implementations by LSAC? So when we say new implementations by LSAC, there are some new things they've done that will affect scores. Some of what they have done will not affect scores. And so the big changes are the change to the LSAC user interface starting in August. For those who are not aware, taking the LSAT is going to look different after the June test. They are making some changes to their software in order to prevent cheating. For those who aren't aware, there's been some cheating on the LSAC going on the past couple of years. And as a result of that cheating, LSAC is cracking down on things, leveling up their security. Part of the leveling up of the security involves changing the interface and also returning the LSAT to being in person for nearly everybody. Now, this will likely reduce the cheating, which could deflate LSAT scores a little bit, because maybe some of those 175 plus LSAT scores were not earned legitimately. It's reasonable to think. But at the same time, there is a bigger cause of high LSAT scores, a couple of bigger causes actually. One of the causes of higher LSAT scores, the so-called LSAT score inflation, meaning more people getting top LSAT scores, leading to rising LSAT medians year after year after year. One big reason is the rise in LSAT retakes. More people are retaking the LSAT than ever before because they can. The LSAT has gone from being offered 4 times a year back in 2018 to being offered 8 times a year starting in 2019. And so because the LSAT's doubled its administrations, they've made it that much easier for people to retake the LSAT. It used to be that retaking the LSAT would often mean you were pushing back your applications an entire cycle. Now you could take it in January and take it again in February. Or you could take the LSAT in August and September and October and November. That's right, 4 consecutive months with 4 consecutive LSAT administrations. The more times you offer it, the easier you make it to take it. And because law schools don't average multiple LSAT scores, but rather only take the highest LSAT score on your record, more reason to retake. Because if you do better, great, only the highest score matters. If you don't, no big deal, your previous high score still counts. So more retakes, more prevalence of retakes, more awareness of retakes means scores rising will continue. Secondly, there's the accommodations piece. The number of people getting accommodations for extra time on the LSAT has exploded, went from roughly 700 people per year with accommodations to now 15,000 people per year. That's a pretty big jump, right? 700 to 15,000, it's like a 30x increase, more or less, right? So what that means is that more people with extra time, more people with extra breaks. Given that the time constraint on the LSAT is pretty real, if you reduce the time constraint or eliminate it entirely, more people are going to get higher scores. As I mentioned before, law schools aren't going to know whether you got extra time or not. All they see is the score. They don't care if you retook it or not, so more reason to retake. Therefore, the incentives point pretty clearly towards taking the LSAT more times, taking it with accommodations. That leads LSAT scores to increase, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So LSAC may have done a lot to reduce the cheating, but they're not reducing the retakes. They're not reducing the accommodations. They are approving approximately 98% of requests for accommodations, which is maybe more than they should. And because they're not averaging multiple LSAT scores, they're giving people more reason to retake the LSAT. So I don't see any of that changing. Just scanning through for more questions here. Mystery Girl asks, is there a such thing as studying too much for the LSAT? Well, we don't want you to burn out, right? So I think studying 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day is too much. I think that becomes counterproductive. I think for most people, probably 5-6 hours a day is a reasonable ceiling that you probably don't need to go past. The LSAT's not the sort of thing you cram for. It's a test of skills and pattern recognition. You build it over time. You need to allow time for the lessons to sink in. So I think that we want to design a study plan that is sustainable, that will not lead to burnout. And we spread your prep over the course of weeks and months rather than mere days. So that's part of the strategizing that we do in our coaching programs, and I'm happy to meet with you personally to talk through that a bit more. At the same time, though, I mean, I can give a different answer, which is the answer of what would it take to achieve your full potential? And we had people earlier asking about 175 plus. How hard is it? And the answer is it's pretty hard to score in the top 1%. You got to study differently than most people to achieve a top score. And so I would not want you to try to get away with doing as little as possible. I guess a question sometimes people asking me, like, how little could I study and still get a top score? And I think that's the wrong perspective, right? We want you to do as much as you can without pushing past your natural limits, because we do want you to achieve your full potential. The LSAT score, weighs more heavily than all of undergrad combined, so it's worth putting in the time. I think 1-2 hours a day is a pretty good baseline minimum, but if you could do more, do more. And so for some folks who are working full time and have kids or in school full time, it's like you'll do 1 or 2 hours on the weekdays, and even that's a stretch, and then you'll do a bit more on weekends, and that's good. But know that if you're only doing 5-10 hours a week, you probably want to allow more than 3 months to study for this, because your competition is certainly putting in more time. But I want you to do as much as you can, considering the importance of the LSAT to get you the best possible outcomes. I see Guyu's asking, as an undergrad student, what should I be doing right now? I don't know where to start. Well, what year in undergrad are you? Because my answer might be different depending on whether you are a freshman or a sophomore versus a junior or a senior. If you're a freshman, I'd say come back in a couple of years. You don't need to start yet. If you're a sophomore, though, I mean, you can start now. If you want to take a very slow and steady approach, dip your toes in the LSAT waters just a little bit, you could start now, take the LSAT in the fall. Because, I mean, you're a sophomore now, you'll be a junior in the fall. If you took it in, say, August or September, you're a year ahead of schedule. You knocked it out. You can rest easy while all your classmates are studying for the LSAT and you're already done with it. Or you're giving yourself more time to retake it if you need to. You're taking a more slow and steady approach. Your LSAT score is good for 5 years, by the way. So you could knock it out of the way early and then rest easy. And also give yourself more like 6 months, which is better than allowing 3 months, all else being equal. The more time you give yourself, the higher a score you can achieve. But overall, yes, the LSAT is skills-based. And so for that reason, studying at a slower pace over a longer period of time typically yields better results and allows you more time to do more practice tests. I mean, there are approximately 59 numbered official LSAT practice tests, and you don't need to work through all of them, but the more of them you can work through, the better, because the LSAT's all about pattern recognition, and the more examples you see of a given pattern, the more you'll be able to absorb it into your muscle memory, for lack of a better word. Law Schools and Privilege is asking, do lower ranked schools offer full rides for high LSAT scores? Yes, they do. And the reason they do that is because if they can attract a sufficient number of high scoring LSAT applicants, they can raise their ranking and no longer be low ranked. And that's their goal. I mean, a low ranked school wants to become a high ranked school, and a high ranked school wants to maintain its high rank. It's a zero sum game. And so they have budgets they appropriate for spending on scholarships to attract stronger applicants. Dante's asking, do you think a certain level of general intelligence is a prerequisite for 170 plus scores, or conversely, can effective study enable a person with low general intelligence to get a 170 plus? I mean, I want to start by problematizing the idea of intelligence. I think that intelligence it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and we're not necessarily clear on what intelligence actually is. But I'll say this. I mean, a lot of people improve their LSAT scores significantly through exposure to the practice questions. And so that kind of problematizes the idea of needing to be quote unquote smart to do well on the LSAT. If you can improve 20, 30, 40 points or more, were you dumb and then got smart, or did you just get more familiar with the questions that they tend to test you on? And you could say that there are people who get top LSAT scores with no studying, and fine, we all hate those people, right? But regardless, law schools aren't going to care whether you got a 180 without studying or got a 180 after a lot of studying. What matters to them is that you got a top score at the end of the day. And so if you are not a natural born genius like those people that we can't stand, and you got to put in some work, fine, put in the work and get the score. At the end of the day, you earned it. You're going to deserve the outcomes that you get, and you'll be all the better for it. But yes, effective study can enable anybody to get a 170 plus. The question is, are you willing to put in the work? And the good news is, the people who make the LSAT are really, really lazy. They reuse the same questions and methods of reasoning over and over and over. And so you can, through practice, through study, through exposure, familiarize yourself with the types of reasoning they test, the types of arguments they include, so that when you see a new one, you can then relate it back to all the previous ones. You'll have that subconscious muscle memory for it, and you'll be able to get the question right pretty quickly because you won't have reasoned through it for the first time under timed conditions. You will have seen it all before. And as one data point, at least, I mean, I personally raised my own LSAT score from a 152 to a 175. And it took me an entire year, by the way. And at least half of that was a complete waste of time. If I had done it properly, I could have knocked it out in less than half the time, just a couple months maybe, because the LSAT is ultimately a test of pattern recognition. If you can spot the tricks and traps, you can avoid them. It all comes down to understanding how the test makers think and seeing it from their perspective. And so if there's one thing I'm trying to do here is to take the lessons I learned from my prep, the mistakes that I made, and help you study more effectively to get to your goal score faster. But I think that there are more practice questions available than ever before, available to you for free or at least pretty cheap directly from the people who make the LSAT. And the LSAT's also an easier format than ever before because they've removed logic games, so there's less material for you to study. You've only got to focus on logical reasoning and reading comp, and logical reasoning is 2/3 of the test. So any gains you make in your understanding of logical reasoning will be doubled across those two sections. And so we can help you make a hyper-efficient study plan focused only on the high yield areas to start with, at least the more common question types, to get you the largest possible score increase in the shortest period of time. If you want to take the LSAT in 2 months in June or 4 months in August, you knock it out. You apply, the second applications open in September. That's really the optimal time frame. June for a first take, August for a second take, apply in September. Because when you apply early, it's easier to get in. There's more scholarship money available. And you've had 2 takes under your belt. Maybe even if 3 if you also did the April test. But regardless, if you're starting now, you still got plenty of time to improve and achieve a top score. And if you're looking for support, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. For those of you just joining, the link to book that free tutoring with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. I'm genuinely happy to help out anybody watching this now or later. That's an open offer. Any of you can book that free tutoring lesson with me. I genuinely enjoy those calls. What we do during those calls is we look at where you're currently at, what your goal score is, what your goal law school is, what's your time frame. In other words, you want to improve X number of points in Y weeks or Y months. So let's say you want to improve 20 points in 4 months. We can make a plan for that. You want to improve 10 points in 2 months. We can make a plan for that too, considering your availability, your learning style, your particular weak areas. We take all that into consideration to craft a study plan for you. So if you want to talk through what that could look like, you could book the free tutoring with me. For those just joining, welcome. I do these lives every single weekday, by the way, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these. The algorithm doesn't really boost these lives because the LSAT's not a sexy topic. I'm not dancing around here or anything. Not that you'd want me to or anything, but I do genuinely appreciate your spreading the word about this. I'm sharing it to your socials, sharing it on your TikTok social, sharing it in any group chats you're part of, Facebook groups, subreddits, Discord channels. The more this grows, the more I'll expand it over time. Part of the inspiration for me doing the additional reading comp explanations that I'm recording is because these lives have been so much fun. And so I genuinely do appreciate your support. And so now I'm on this mission to create explanations for every single reading comprehension passage ever. There's about 400 of them. I'm approximately a quarter of the way through, but I'm going to keep working at them every weekday. And the recordings of these lives are all on my YouTube channel. And so you can access them through the link in my bio. Go over to YouTube and you'll see the live tab of the channel where all the lives going back several years are there. The YouTube channel, for those of you who aren't aware, I know that a lot of you are watching on TikTok and Instagram and such. I've been doing the YouTube channel for pretty hardcore for about 8 years or so now. So there's literally thousands of videos on there, all organized by topic, by difficulty level, both logical reasoning, reading comp admissions as well. So please spread the word about that too. I'll be back on Monday, same time, same place. Might pop in before that to do some more reading comp explanations. I'll see you all then, if not sooner. In the meantime, all the best. Take care. Thanks for joining.